Hi, I'm Ken Marr and this is the Mr. Ken's Classroom, where I record on YouTube online training courses which I run in Oracle and Linux. This is the first of 8 classes, 8 2-hour classes in SQL. This class was free and I ran it last week, but the recordings didn't work properly, so I'm recording it again today without an audience. So it'll probably be shorter than the 2 hours that it would run for. Now, if you found this link on the WhatsApp group, you'll see that it suggested that before you look at the video, you unzip the sql.zip file and install SQL Developer. The zip file contains a folder called Notes, and in that folder you'll find ORASQL session 1a.pdf, which is the course notes for this session. This is the course notes. Actually, this is the complete course notes for the whole course, which is 202 pages. So the file you're finding there is only about 40 pages, but then we only had 2 hours. But it's the same thing, basically. So this is Oracle SQL for Beginners. My name's Ken Marr. There's my email address if you want to contact me. This session is recording, and we're looking at the Oracle database in its different versions actually. So this is Mr. Ken's Classroom because people started calling me Mr. Ken in the WhatsApp group, and I've been doing this for many years, running live classroom courses in Oracle and in Linux and a few other things like MySQL. So I decided I'd share my expertise, mostly for free but very cheap, in a set of live training sessions based on the notes that I produced over the years. So before the course, as I've just said, you need to download and unzip SQL Zip, there it is there, and install SQL Developer if you want to follow along with the practicals. The schedule is a 3-day course which will run as a set of short 2-hour sessions. Now, it was originally going to be 18 hours, but during the first sessions most people decided that they'd rather do the exercises out of a class because you get 24/7 access to my database. So it will probably only be 16 hours, so it will probably only be 8 2-hour sessions. The sessions started last Sunday. The next session is on Thursday. 3 sessions during the day to cover different time zones, and that will run for the next 5 weeks, I think. Start times depend on the time zone, so you can look at them, but they can be changed if need be. No prerequisites for this course. You need a knowledge of SQL for PLSQL, but for this course you don't really need to know. It helps if you know a bit, but you don't need to know any SQL at all. Hi, now you might notice that there was a gap there and the notes have changed. That's because I'm now looking at the Office version of the notes on the PDF version, because I wanted to change them because your version mentions VirtualBox here. I don't want to do that, it confuses people. What we'll say is you have access 24/7 to my Oracle 11G training base, running in the cloud, hosted by Cloud Clusters. Here you can see it actually. This is Cloud Clusters. It's quite cheap and easy to run up a database there. It costs about $6 a month to run. Back over here we were looking at the zip folder, weren't we? And if you're wondering what I'm looking at here, it's not Windows, this is Linux. There's the notes. So you get access to the database, so you can do the exercises out of the class because the database is there all the time. There are various handouts that can be found in the online training folder. That contains handouts, course overviews, quizzes and their answers, setup files, a training folder, and the actual zip files in there as well. You can go there from here. I prefer to view it like that. So there are handouts in there for PL, SQL and SQL. There are overviews. There's the complete course length contents of this SQL course. Prerequisite, the follow-up, which is PLSQL, on-site requirements, and then what we're going to cover in detail on the course. Like I said, there are quizzes in there, answers in there, there are setup files in there, and the zip file which contains the setup files is there. Actually, the setup files contain SQL Developer and a file on how to import the Oracle VM, which I mentioned, but I don't want to confuse the issue and use that for the course, so we'll forget about that for the moment. Go back here and go to the page. Now the cost, these courses are really expensive. I mean, a trainer can command about £500 a day when they're running a course. So for a 3-day course you have to pay the trainer £1,500. So a company like QA, a big training company in the UK, if they're trying to make a profit, have to charge a good deal more than that. Here's a course they run, and this combines SQL and PLSQL as a 5-day course, and for that they charge £2,680. Now if you halve that, just did a 3-day SQL course, that would cost you £1,300 or more, and that's per delegate, although companies do get a discount. So pair with that, I'm giving it away for nothing here. The first session is, or was, free because it's gone now. This is it that you're looking at, so it is free. If you want to come on the next session, session 2, there are 7 more sessions. The sessions cost £4 each, a total of 16 hours for £28. Doesn't actually say that there, does it? That's better, now it does. The first session is free, £4 each for the next 7 sessions, a total of 16 hours, whoops, for £28. That's payable before each session starts, so you pay for each session individually. So if you stop, you haven't wasted your money. There's some reasons why training is not free, which you might have seen before. It takes a long time to create this stuff. Writing courseware and exercises, testing the exercises, setting up an environment, a database in the cloud and populating it. I had to buy a decent microphone, and then you have to spend a lot of time finding and recruiting delegates. That's a real hard bit. And then do the course delivery, and it's how I make a living, which is why it's not free. Now why you might want to do it, my unique selling points are: this training is in preparation for the Oracle Database SQL Certified Associate exam. Which is there. I'll just check something. I've forgotten whether I was recording or not. It is recording. Okay, you get my 20 years of experience. It's designed to run at a time convenient for you because I'm running I'm only going to run 3 courses a day because nobody turned up for the 1900 course last week. You get hands-on experience of SQL in a free 2-hour class, full set of PDF notes, set up and example files. You can use the VirtualBox appliance, but like I said, you get access 24/7 to my 11G training database, and I'll be posting a recording of the class when this is finished on my YouTube channel and on the WhatsApp group, and you can follow up with emails if you want. My email address is on the first page. So the course proper starts here. This explains about databases storing business information nowadays. That's the way to do it. And this course gives an introduction. Excuse me, I'll just stop my phone from pinging. That's better. Okay, so it's an introduction to relational databases and to SQL, which is structured query language, the standard way of accessing a relational database. It's easy to learn, and this is supposed to be a fun way to do it. We're basing this, or I'm basing this, on Oracle 12c. It said 19c on the front page, but you'll see there's little difference between 12C and 19C where SQL is concerned. You can apply these principles to other databases like SQL Server, MySQL, Access and DB2. You get full course notes, the sample files, these exercise files, take them away with you. And this is what we're going to cover. So during this course we look at the structure of relational database and how you create what are called entity relationship diagrams. You might have seen them. They're sets of boxes, each representing a table, and the tables are all joined together in a relationship, which is why it's called a relationship diagram. We'll look at SQL Developer, which you use to access the database, and then we'll look at Select, Insert, Update and Delete, which are the four main SQL statements, although Select is the one that's used most often. Perhaps 80% of the time people are using a Select statement. We look at creating objects like indexes, tables and views. We look at joining multiple tables together, which is quite fun. And then there are sections on functions and more advanced features. The way the course works is you watch me, see what I'm doing and learn what I'm doing and understand what I'm doing, and then you do it yourself. You can do a lot of copying and pasting on the course, especially with the examples, but you should do the exercises yourself, because if you just cut and paste examples you won't learn it that way. So try out the examples, the exercises, experiment. You can't break anything. Ask me questions. It's always very quiet in an online course because all the microphones are off to kill any background noise. But you're welcome to turn your microphone on and ask a question of other people as well, which is the leaned on bit. Learn by your mistakes. Make them in training rather than in the live environment. And enjoy yourself. You might have come on the course because a particular reason, to gain something. You might want to be able to do something by the end of the course. I'll ask if you do. At the end of the notes you'll find a sample data, which is the data used in the database, the examples and exercises, and also there are some short self-study sections at the end of various sections because there's too much material in here normally to cover in 3 days. So here's a table of contents. Now if you're looking at this file here, that is that file there, your table of contents will be different because that was the file for just the first class. This is the file for all the classes, so I pasted them back together. So in that class we looked at part of data retrieval 1, which lasted more than 2 hours, and then we looked at the rest of the contents for the other classes 2 to 8, which is this lot, and that matches mostly what I mentioned further back. So the database, select statement, create, insert, update and delete, joining tables together, functions, subqueries and unions and advanced queries. And then if anybody's interested we can look at SQL Plus, which is a command line way of running queries. I'll show you in a minute. And export and import, which is a simple way of backing up your tables. And then the course proper starts here. Again, you might notice another break there. That's because rather than recording a 2-hour video, I record the video in sections in case I make a mess of things and have to start again. And then I just join the sections together afterwards, which is very easy to do. So this first section looks at the select statement and running select statements in SQL Developer. Using a few functions which I introduced. Although there's a section on functions, I introduce them as we go through the notes. So simple ones which are obvious like upper and rounding, and conversion ones like to char and trunk. These bits here, that's a cheek that, because that is not in this section. If it had been we wouldn't have got there because we never got that far. So I'm going to take that out. Actually I'll take that back. I think that is in this section. Whoops, making a mess of this. There we go. I'll alter it later. Shouldn't be altering it now. Okay, the relational database. Now Oracle is client server. So you run a client like SQL Developer on your laptop, and the server runs hosted by cloud clusters in the ether somewhere. I'm not going to read all this, I don't want to dwell on this. Oracle's gone through various versions, life cycles, I suppose. I go back to version 8i, then there was 9i, then 10G, 11G. The G is a grid database which enabled administrators to manage many databases on the network at once in an easy way, I suppose. But then the cloud came around, so Oracle invented 12C, which is a cloud or a container database. Container because the 12C database is a container database that contains pluggable user databases. See, back before 12C, 11G and going backwards, there was only one big database, which if you used Microsoft SQL Server is completely different to that, or even Access if you've used that, because in those technologies you can create lots of little databases. Oracle didn't work like that, but in 12C it does. You can have multiple pluggable databases, pluggable because you can unplug them from the database, the container database. Now at the SQL level, what we're doing in PLSQL doesn't make any difference, but it does make a lot of difference if you're doing admin, you're the database administrator. As it says here, there are few differences between 11G and 12C. I think there are 2 pages in the notes, things which work in 12C but won't work in 11G, the database in the cloud. In that case, I'll run up the virtual machine and I'll show you them in 12C. 18C and 19C came along when Oracle jumped on the bandwagon of naming your product with the year, which is what Linux does now. So 18C came around in 2018, 19C in 2019. But they are essentially the same as Oracle 12C, with slight differences which won't affect SQL. There's a mention of the handouts. At the end of the notes you'll find the entity relationship diagrams for the tables that we're using. That's the cat if you can hear him. So a couple more pages before we start on developer. So what is SQL? SQL is a non-procedural language used to manage a relational database. So you can create objects in the database like tables. Hello, making a lot of noise. And insert, update and delete the data. Now you can expand that, and the next course after this one is PLSQL, which is a procedural language extension to SQL. And in languages, programming languages, you can do 3 things. You can use variables, places where you store values. You can write if statements. If this is true, do this. If not, do this. And you can have loops, so things go round and round. So PLSQL adds those to SQL to give you a programming environment. And what you can do then is write programs and store them in the database. These programs are called things like, well, they are procedures, functions, triggers and packages in the main. Now SQL is not just a query language, it's a complete database relational management system. And it splits into these 3 things. You've got DML, DDL and DCL. So DML is manipulating the data, the main one being select, but you also got insert, update and delete, and 2 which are not in the notes you've got, commit and rollback. Then you've got data definition language, which you can use create, alter and drop objects like tables, and then data control language where you can grant permissions to other users to look at your data or revoke those permissions. That's not a complete set of commands, there are others, but those are the ones that we're covering in the course. Now, why use SQL? Well, why not just use a GUI, a click and collect, graphical user interface? Well, the reasons are some of the important features of SQL, such as unions, which is when you join two or more queries together, or subqueries, which is a query within a query, can't be accessed via a GUI. DDL, defining objects using a GUI, is very slow. It's much quicker to write a script, do it in a script. Also importantly, SQL can be used for within other applications and languages, so it's embedded in PHP, Java, C#, Visual Basic, most languages. You can embed SQL. Don't need a full stop there. And SQL is the industry standard language, so it looks good on your CV. And if you decide to cross-train and go to a company who use MySQL, there's differences, but not a lot of differences between the two. Now, SQL Developer. Now, if you've downloaded SQL Developer and installed it, you can open it now. I'm running on Linux, so I open it by running a short command called an alias, which runs a longer command, and that will start Developer for me. There it is. Don't know why I get this null window. What you probably find when you open it is you will get what's called a start page. So we'll look like that. So in the past, the most commonly used tool for Oracle users was SQL Plus. But it's not the easiest environment to use. It's very difficult to use, in fact. So a lot of other companies, other than Oracle, develop GUI tools for running queries, like Toad, which is tool for Oracle application developers, SQL Tools, WinSQL. I used to use all of these in the past until Oracle came up with their own, SQL Developer. So SQL Developer is a graphical version of SQL Plus, and it gives you a convenient way to perform basic tasks like browsing the data, creating, editing and deleting objects, running statements. If you want to see SQL Plus, again, I run it from a terminal in Linux. SQL 77 takes me into the cloud database, which is an 11G Express Edition database. And there's the SQL prompt. Now the problem with this was you had to type your queries and get them right, really, because if you made a mistake, there was no up arrow to get things back again. That's me pressing up arrow. That didn't work. And it's not a GUI environment. You can't use the mouse in here. It's still available and still be used, especially by administrators, and I have an appendix on how to use it. But we might not cover that. We'll see what time we've got at the end. If I come out of there, right. So this is why we use SQL Developer. You can connect to any target database provided you've got the right information. So in fact, I've got two users here. That one connects to VirtualBox because I've named it. It's user 1 at VirtualBox. This one connects to user 77. You might have seen in the posts I've been doing. That's the user we're using on the cloud database. So having opened it, the exercise here says, with the help of your tutor, connect to the training database. And the easiest way, well, let me show you a few things on here first. The easiest way is just there, create connection manually. It opens a window. We'll fill them in a minute, but before we do that, here you've got things like information, tutorials, demos and training. Down here, this is command line, so this is SQL Plus, I think. This one allows you to run Oracle Live SQL in a web browser for free. I mean, you'd have to create your own tables, but it means you don't have to create your own database, which is quite neat. Now, if you click on Create a Connection manually, what I'm going to do is show you a connection that I've already got, which is this one, and have a look at properties. So what you need to fill in is the information which you might have seen in the posts I've been making. the username, user77, the password is training, the host name is 204.2.195.74, the port is 31370, and the SID, system identifier, is XE. We're using 11G database. 11G uses a SID. If we had a 12C database, 12C uses a service name, so we would put a service name in there. Now if you fill in those details and click test, it should come up with success. Click test. There we go. There, and I'm successfully connected. Oh, the other thing I didn't mention is give it a name. Now you could put anything in there. I could put Ken in there, that's me, or user77, but I make my names meaningful. This is the user77 connected to the cloud. That one is user1 connected to VirtualBox. So, you know, things should be meaningful. It makes more sense. If you've got it up and running and tested it, then you can save it. Oh, mine's already there, you won't get that. And then connect. That's interesting. Oh, that's because I'm pointing at the wrong one, aren't I? How did that happen? Sorry. Now we're all prone to error. There we go, that'll give me a success. He must have changed the service name somehow. Oh, now the SC's gone missing. What is it doing? Test it again. Don't do it the way I'm doing it. I'm showing you how not to do it. I don't know what was going on there. There's another break, but all I've done is open the window again, and now it works. I don't need to save it because I already have, but you should save yours, and then if you want to see what objects the user owns, drop down the objects there and you will see tables, views, indexes, whatever. And we can look at some queries. So what you'll get here is two things. You get a worksheet which you're in. You also get a query builder. This is something I forgot to mention on the course because I don't use it. We'll have a look at how the query builder works in a minute. So in the worksheet you can run a query. Now if you're correctly connected to user77 in the cloud, you can copy these queries, for instance, and paste them in here. That didn't work very well, did it? Copy these queries and paste them in here. That's better. Bit of a mess. Just tidy it up a bit. That's better. Take the tabs out. Now what you see from this, as it mentions here, is the environment is not case sensitive. You can write your select statement in lowercase, in uppercase, in mixed case if you want to, and if you spell things correctly, like select, which is the main SQL keyword that you're going to use with queries, it goes blue. If I spell it incorrectly, it's black. So when you spell it right, it goes blue, so that's supposed to help you. You also see these pop-ups, which is prompting you if you want to choose something from that list. So I've got two queries in there. To run a query, click in the query and just press go. Click in the query. This one, right, the asterisk says all the columns from the product table. Let's go over this way a bit so you can see more of what's in there. Okay, so those are the columns in the product table. You can find that out if you drop down views, drop down product, you'll see all the columns in product. So this one, if you don't use an asterisk, what you commonly use is a comma separated set of column names. So now I only get product ID, cost and sell. Now before anybody says they're not tables, that's true. They're not tables. The reason is, if I give you access to tables in user 77, which is user 99 loading, so that you had the opposite, the tables with the same names as the views, but no views. Okay? This is what happens in the real world. This is a real user, and he's got access to these tables. He can insert, update and delete the data. User 77 can't do that because user 77 has got no tables. What they've got is read-only views based on another user. That means that we can all share user 77 and nobody can change the data, which I thought was a neat way of doing it. And it doesn't make any difference to the queries, because to the database a view is like a table. A view is a select statement based on a table. We'll do views later in the notes. Where's my query gone? I had a query in there, didn't I not? Where's it gone? Oh, I see. It's opened me another cloud. Look, it's opened the cloud window for 99. There's the query I had in there. So I've run these two queries. If you want to run them together, there's two ways of doing that. Select them both and run there, and you get two tabs down here. First query, second query. And the other way, you don't have to select anything. You can run the whole window as a script by clicking there, which is F5. If you like using keyboard, as I do. And this is different. Instead of side by side like the query results, this goes one above the other. So there's one query there and one query there. Now the other point I made over here, as well as talking about case sensitivity, was the semicolon in these queries. The semicolon is optional unless you use multiple SQL statements. To illustrate that, if I delete that query will run. So I can press the button there, or you can use Control Enter. And you notice we're getting multiple tabs across the bottom. If you don't want those, you just close them like that. Just click on the X. It's interesting actually, but if you go off the query, it doesn't run. Oh, it does. Ah, I know why. If you put a semicolon there and go off the query, it doesn't run. See, I often separate all my queries with semicolons. If you put a semicolon in, and you do have to do that if you've got multiple statements, then the cursor has to be within the statement. To illustrate that, if I go back to where we were, we had two queries. Okay, we've already seen that that query runs with a cursor in it, that one runs with a cursor in it. But look what happens if I take the semicolon off there. Now this one doesn't run, and this one doesn't run either, because the SQL command has not been properly ended. So multiple select statements, always end them with a semicolon. The way I do that is put it on the next line like that. It's just habit, and it splits your select statements up. I thought it was neat. And this is my point about putting the cursor there. It runs if you're in the query. It doesn't run if you put it there. It's a common mistake I make. It also doesn't run if you inadvertently select something, because now it's running what's been highlighted. So that will give you an error as well. So that's how you run simple queries, and it says there we're logged in. Try those two queries. Now somebody asked when I was doing this, how do you save your query? Because we were talking about doing the exercises, and when you've done the exercises you might want to save the results. You just go File, Save As. Well, save first if you haven't saved it before. Save all your tabs if you've got multiple tabs, because here you can open other query windows. So there's a query window for user 99 in the cloud, and there's another query window for user 77 in the cloud. So you can have multiple windows for the same user with different queries in. You don't need to save them now, but you can if you want to. Now over the page you can make customizations to developer. I like to change a few things. One is line numbers. If you toggle there, you can turn line numbers off, line numbers on again. But if you want to keep line numbers on, go to Tools, Preferences, Code Editor. So Tools, Preferences, Code Editor, and look for line gutter and turn line numbers on. That I like to do. You can also, if you want to, change the font size there. So I've got, mine's on 16 actually, I'll turn it down a bit. It's quite big, to 14. And the other thing I like to do is change the ORASQL syntax colours. There are colour schemes here. You can use Ocean, which is nice I suppose, if you like that sort of thing. Twilight, which is white on black. I actually like Classic, which is white on blue. And sometimes I change the Drihig comment. A comment, that's a comment line there with the 2 hyphens at the beginning, as we'll see later. You want to customize how that appears. So the foreground could be whiter, perhaps. Doesn't make any difference. The font style could be bold and italic. There we go. So if you get any comments, they should come out like that. Now my screen goes blue, which I quite like. There's one other thing here you might want to add, which is snippets. We won't be using snippets till later, but they are useful because they show you sets of functions. You'll find snippets on the View menu. There it is there. And what it does, it puts these snippets to the right. You can shrink them and bring them back up again. And it gives you a sense of functions. So there are ways of counting rows, finding the minimum, maximum and summary of values. But you've also got, if you drop that down, you've got analytic functions. There are lots of those. I don't think we're going to cover any of those. You've got character functions, which we will look at, like lower and upper, init cap, trim, substring. Those we'll be looking at later. You've got conversion functions like to char and to date, which we'll look at, and MVL as well. You've got date formats, which we'll look at, and date and time functions like months between, current date, sysdate. I'll show you why snippets are not important, they're useful when we look at the functions. So if that closes a window, I think that one minimizes it. There we are, it just sits on the side, so you can bring it back if you want. So we'll come back to snippets later. Now let's expand our where clause, select clause. I can clear this by clicking there on the rubber. Well, this one I can close, and that one, whoops, the mouse move, and that one, go away, there. Now what I could do is copy that query and paste it in here. Now it's fine. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to type for these examples, so I don't want you typing them all. Now the problem with that is if it's got quotes in it, single or double quotes, they don't always copy properly across. So a better way to do it is to use a file of data, file of SQL examples. In the SQL unzipped folder, you'll find the folder SQL, and in there you'll find EX1. This is examples 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, which makes the 6 sections in the notes, although I think that's 2 sections together, that one, define and update. And as long as you've got a query window open here, you can just pull that across and it opens it here. Now you can run the queries from here. These are all the examples in the notes, or you can highlight a query, which is what I tend to do. Instead of messing this file up, I copy that and I put it in my query window, paste, and then I run it from here. So you can do that. That will give you all these examples. I didn't copy all the examples because the only thing that's different is what we're comparing. So this where clause compares numeric values, although you can use equals, greater than, less than, greater than or equals and less than or equals. Make sure that's the right way around. It's not equals, greater than, and no spaces between the two. You can use them for character literals as well as numbers. So this is finding things greater than 250. If I put an equals, it finds equal to 250. You can't say, well you can, but it doesn't work, not equals. If you want not equals, you've got 3 options. You can use exclamation mark equals, like that. You can use little hat symbol equals, whoops, sorry, like that. Or you can use the one I like, which is that one, less than, greater than. And they are all not equals to 250. So you can try those out. Now if you ran this query with an equals, for instance, and it said, suppose you were trying to find, whoops, equals to, what a mess, equals to 2500. I mean, there's nothing on there that costs that much, so you get no rows back. Now what you could do to find out what is on the table, see if you made a mistake, is highlight that, because if you click in it, it will run the where clause as well. But a better way, I think, is comment it out. And as I showed you earlier, double hyphen comments out things. I like that, because it goes white as well. So that line is now a comment. In fact, you can put comments anywhere. So this is a comment, and you should comment your queries when you do it for real. People tend not to on courses. Suppose I don't want to see that column anymore, but I might want to put it back. Comment it out like that. So now I only get description, cost and sell for everything, and I can check the cost to see if there was a cost that was 2500, which there wasn't. Now that's one way of doing comments. The other way is you can do a multi-line comment like that. If I want to remove this where clause, I can put it between slash asterisk. They don't have to be on new lines, these. It's just how people tend to do it. Asterisk slash. That's a comment as well. What else? In the notes it probably says things like, not these exact figures, find the cost where the cost is greater than 250 or 25. And in the exercise it will put a pound sign. Don't put a pound sign there. Numeric only. But somebody asked, can you put decimals? Yes, you can. That's a comment, isn't it? I beg your pardon. What am I doing? That's stupid. Let's do that again. What a wally. If you've been in the class, hopefully you would have pointed out to me my error there. Of course it works because it's commented out. That's better. Invalid character. It's a fairly easy error message. But you can put 0.00 if you want, or you can put something that matches. There weren't any equal to that, were there? But we could find some by saying greater than that. Whoops, I'm to the greater than that. And then we could say equal to 47.5, like that, which is of course the same as doing 47.50. What Oracle doesn't do is print 47.50. If it's a 0, it ignores it. So that's 93.00, that's 367.50. It doesn't put the decimal places in. You can do it, we'll see later on, but it doesn't display them normally. Now that's numeric data. If it's literal data, you need to tell it it's a literal. So if we go from there back to the examples here, there's one looking for literal data. We want towns equal to York. Town is a character field. York is characters. Paste. But that doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is, unlike numbers, literal fields have to be in single quotes, like that. The reason it says it's an invalid identifier is it because it thinks York is a column, or should be a column on the database like town, but it's not. That works, but you don't get anything back. And the reason you don't get anything back is when you're using character data, the data is case sensitive. You can write the query how you like until you get to the data, but the data is case sensitive, and York, if you look at the data, easy way to do that, comment out the where clause and run it. York is spelt with an uppercase Y, there and there. So to see it, I do it like that, and I get York. So you have to remember, if it's numbers, you just put the numbers, decimal point, decimals. Don't put quotes around numbers. Not because it doesn't work, it does work. But it's not efficient, because this is a number, cost, this is a literal, and it has to do a conversion. It has to convert cost to character. I'm not sure which way around it does it. Probably that way, and compare it with the literal, or convert the literal to a number. You don't want that, it just slows your query down. So single quotes around literals. Now, as I said, if you came on the real free course the other day, we didn't do the exercises. We said we'll do the exercises afterwards. I did run through them though, just to point out that I've got two sets of tables in here. I know we're using views, but you know, bear with me until you find out what a view is. Two sets of tables. The order tables are supplier and product. So you've got suppliers and products. If you click on them, what you get is the layout of the table. We can also see the data. Unless you pin them, which you can do up here somewhere, you can only open one at a time. So to pin it, one of them pins it. So that's products, that's supplier, and also you've got order headers, which is sale order. So our products are 3-character code. The R2 is a disk, FU1 is a printer, I think. Supplier codes are 4-character, and then you've got orders, where you've got order numbers, and then you've got sale line, which is all the lines. So those 4 tables make up the order tables which you can use in the exercise. And the exercise says display a list of all suppliers in Leeds. Select all products where selling price is equal to 64. So that one's suppliers. That one's products. Select all order headers. Order headers up here is sale order. Where the order number is greater than or equal to 105. And to tackle these, you find what column you need, the table it's on, and what restriction you should add. The easiest way to find the columns in the tables is just drop the table down. So there are the columns in the product table, there are the columns in the supplier table. Now there's our query there. Whoops. The last one we did, which was, let's go back to products because we're looking at products next. So this query is select from and where. Now a select statement starts with select. Actually it can start with the word with, but ignore that. Starts with the word select, followed by a from. I mean, you can put all sorts of things in a select statement. You usually put comma separated columns, but you can put sub-selects and all sorts of other things. But select comes first, followed by a from, and in the from you put a table or tables usually. Then you can add a where clause. There are other things that follow, but a where clause comes after the from. You can only have one where clause, but you can add ands and ors to your where clause. But how you do that depends on whether your query will work or not. So let's dump that query and go here and look at the next 2 queries, which are those 2 lines 29 to 39. You can see why I need the numbers on, so I can tell you where we are. So if I copy that and paste that in here, and run the first query. Now this first query says, give me those details from the product table where the product ID, which is character, is equal to BK1, or the product ID is equal to CA1, and the cost is greater than 250. Now if you run that, it doesn't work. I mean, that's CA1 and that's BK1, but that one is 14.5. If I run this query, which asks a similar thing, where cost is greater than 250 and product ID equals BK1 or equals CA1, that one does work. Now the reason why the first one doesn't work is because AND takes priority over OR. So it does that first. You run the query and it says if its product ID is CA1 or the cost is greater than 250, or the product ID is BK1, which isn't what we asked for. Now the way around that, that's why you get the wrong answer, is to use brackets. If you bracket this query and your bracket goes after the where and before the and, round brackets, because you've got the choice of 3. Whoops, sorry, press the wrong key. There we go. And you only get 1 row now. So now it's doing what's in brackets, which is what I asked for, BK1 or CO1, and cost equals 250. And there's the brackets there. I should point out that whatever you've done just before an exercise, you'll normally have to use in an exercise. So we come across an exercise now, we've just done brackets, you probably need brackets in the exercise. Now this exercise uses the other set of test tables, the film tables. On the film tables you've got members in a, oops, stop it, members in a video rental club. Sorry, DVD rental club nowadays, isn't it? Download film rental club. So you've got member ID, name and address, etc. Rent films. So you've got a film table, and in the film table you've got things like film ID, name of the film, what it cost to hire, when it was made, and in between the two you've got a rental table. So a particular member rents a particular film on a particular day and then returns it. So using those tables, well, they might not all be used actually in this exercise, but those three tables are used together in some of the exercises. I think this exercise just looks at the film table. So it says list all films where the title is not equal to package. So if you go back to film again, some of them are equal to package, so you don't want those four. And the rental cost is equal to £1.75 or £2. So there's some 175s. Remember, you don't put the pound sign in the where clause. And there's £2. And the second one says select all films where the cost is greater than £2. Again, the cost field. And the director ID, which is this field. So you're looking for 2 is equal to 2, or the category ID is equal to 2. And again, same thing, which columns? Well, those are the columns. What table are they on? Film. And what restrictions should you add? So you can try the exercises. If you have any problems with the exercises, you can send me an email. And that brings us to date fields, which is the next bit. So we'll get rid of film. Clear that. Back to retrieve. And look at dates. So dates, we can go from 69 up to 49. Copy that. Paste it in here. Get rid of that. So there are two tables with dates on. One is rental, which I showed you, which has got date rented, date returned. And the other one, which is using in the examples here, is, not that one, is sale order. Which has got, look at the data, date ordered and date due. Now if you select asterisk, that's all columns, from sale order, which is all rows, here you get those rows and you get the default date format. The default date format is a 2 numeric day, a 3 character month and a 2 numeric year, which means 2013 rather than 1913. A lot of people use a 4 character year now because of that confusion. Now I don't like the date like that because it's not the way the British do it. What we do is DDMMYYYY like that, and I also might want to see the time in the 24-hour clock. So to do that I can use a function. Now functions take parameters in brackets, and toChar converts a date field to character based on a template. So what this does, it takes the date field and converts it to display day, month, year with the slashes and the time with a colon. So if I run it there, I get that date order converted. Now that's nice, but it's not very nice because the header's all wrong. The header is the function. Don't want that. Now the way around that is you can use a column alias. If you follow column with a name or with as a name like that, date due, because it was the date due field there. That's neat, I like that. Or with as date due, it will rename the column. So that one does the same query, but renames the column as date due. There's more on aliases later in the notes, but I thought I'd introduce them here. I like to put the as in because it marks it as an alias. This one has an alias there, date due, but it's also got a where clause. So with this one you get less rows. That's because it says where date ord equals the 3rd of September 12. Now what you do in the where clause is you match the format of this field, date ord, with this field. Now if date ord has the default format, because you can change it, it will be 3-SEP-12. Well, it doesn't have to be that actually, because you can use the 3rd of September 2012 if you like typing. I can't see the point in doing that, but it works. So that's a bit on dates. There is a lot more on dates. There's more over the page actually, but there's also more on dates in the section on functions later in the notes. So there's an exercise over the page which looks at all the rows from the rental table where date rented is the 1st of February, and all the rows from rental table where the date rented is in February. So you can try those. Let's go back that way a bit. That's better. Formatting dates. This is one reason why I gave you this file. You don't want to type that in, especially if the quotes don't work. But we can run that query next. It's in the retrieve file on line 71. So if I hike it from there and copy it. The one they didn't put copy and paste at the top of that. A number of times people use it. A bit silly putting it that far down. There we go, and if I run that, what this shows you is the different formats that you can use for the day. For instance, you can format the day like that. You can find the day of the month, the day of the week, the day as a name, the month as 3 characters, the full month, the full year even as 2013. Let's just shove that back over there. You can also use date functions in a where clause. Actually, I used something here I shouldn't have done. I've used concatenation there. The double pipe there joins two things together, and I should have covered it in the notes before we did it for dates, so I must have shuffled the pages around. Anyway, I will come to that. All these things here you will see over the page. There are the date formats you can use. Well, some of them, there are more I think, but there's most of them, the main ones. Let's look at formatting dates. If we go back to retrieve, oh, I see what they're getting at here, or I'm getting at. That's not in here as an example, this one. But you can, I said that in your where clause, you're comparing like with like. You're comparing the date there with the date in the correct format. That's true. And here, you can convert the date. You can say in the where clause, to char date ord, make it equal to a month, and see if that's equal to April. Actually, I don't know why that's there. It shouldn't be. You're going to get a full set of these notes. Why did I do that? Let's get rid of that. I can see why I did it, but we don't want to do it. me show you what's happening here. Right, here it's using month and FM month in a where clause. And that is over here, it's this query here with the multiple where clauses. If I copy that and put it in, get rid of that, put it in here, drop that and paste it and run it. There we go, so it's got date ord, and then it's got the month and the FF month. Now, point of that this is, month and FF month do two different things. Month, yes, it gives you the month, but it gives you a month and adds trailing spaces so that it's the same length as September. So that if you want to line the months up, you can do. Now, when you're doing a comparison, you don't want that. You don't want trailing spaces. So FM month will format the month and take out the spaces on the end. And what this double pipe does is concatenates the output from the to char with an asterisk to show you that there are spaces there and there aren't spaces there. I should have actually done a concatenation first, but never mind. Now let's see how it works in a where clause. Here's a where clause where we're looking for rows where the month is equal to February. If you think about it, it's spacing February out. I think it's two spaces. One space. Yes, one space. See, if you put a space in there, it works, but you don't want to mess about doing that. So what you do is you use FM month. And what FM month does, it does that for you. Well, effectively, it takes the spaces out on the left-hand side. And then you're matching February. And of course, what you can do, which is even easier, is this. Just use numbers. Say we're MM, which will be 02, YY, which will be 13, is equal to 02, 13. And that works as well. But to char has its uses, so you might want to use that. Those are the date formats, as I mentioned. And then we've got 2 pages left. So what we'll do is we'll save where we're up to. There, I've just stopped and saved the video at that point. I've got 6 bits of video now to join together. What panics me is if I forget to start the video up again as I did on one class, but it didn't matter because it didn't record properly anyway. Let's have a look at to date and trunk as used in a where clause. We've used to char in a where clause back here. You can also use to date. Now to char goes date to character because it's to char. To date goes character to date. And this is the next example. I didn't mean that. Oh, no, I didn't mean that at all. Never mind. I can show you something. Here we are. To date and trunk, which goes from there to there. We'll copy that. We've got nothing to paste it into. We've got nothing to paste it into. I did this on purpose. I didn't really. Drop that down and go to user 77. And it'll open a new window. Well, it will if you click OK. And then paste it in there. One other thing I should have mentioned, before you close the welcome page, if you don't want to see it again, right down at the bottom, there's a little tick box called Show on Startup. If you turn that off, you won't see it next time you start up. Because I don't really want that. I can get it back from Help Start Page, because that's what it used to be called. They changed it to Welcome Page. Now this lot here We can run this query, and what we've got is that's wrong. Sorry, take that line out before you run it, because we need to work down to that one. I've forgotten to do that. Right, we've got sets of orders from Salord with date due, and what we're trying to do is find the 7th of May. Now there is the 7th of May. And if you look, you'll see it's got a time on it. Mostly they're 0, midnight, because the default is if you insert into a table, the time on a date field will be midnight. But for these I put in a time, so this one's got 11:30, that one's got 10:45. Now what this means is if you try and find it by just saying where date due equals 7th of May, it doesn't work, because it's expecting the 7th of May with midnight. Now there are ways around it. If you know what the time is, which if you think about it is unlikely, you can do it like that. You can say where due date is now that doesn't work either. Sorry, I was a bit thrown there, thinking it was going to work. Of course it doesn't work, because date due here in the default format has got midnight on it, and this has got 11:30, so they're never going to be equal. You can do it, however, is what I should have said, if you know the time, by saying where date due is equal to, and then convert this string into DDMMYY HHMI, because we know that date due has got 11:30 in it, but I said that wrong actually. That is the default. That has got 11:30 in it, but you can't use that format because that is the default format. That's what I should have said. But this does work because date due contains 11:30, and here you're comparing it with that date and time converted into that string. So you can use to date to convert in the where clause like that. It's long-winded and difficult, and there's an exercise on it you can try. A much easier way to do it is to use trunc. Now what trunc does is chops off the time, like you would trunc decimals, and it chops off a decimal. I take that where clause out and put that one back in again and run it. That works because trunc chops the time of 11:30 off of date due and sends it back to midnight, and then you can compare it with the default, which is the 7th of May 13 at midnight. So that works, and that's what trunc does. And like I said, we revisit these I think in the section on functions, and there are other date functions. And then last page, because this is where we stopped when we did the free class. 22 pages is enough for 2 hours. I don't know how much I've got actually. It'd be interesting to see when I join these bits of video back together. Well, I just stopped again, so I've got 7 bits now. I want a mistake right at the end. So, I've lost my file as well, which was done, but I can get it back. So if I go there it is, it was that one. Just drag it over here. Look at that, it remembers where it was. Isn't that clever? And I go down here and look at lines 100 to 112. Copy them. Paste them in here. Right, now, some databases, like SQL Server, and I think MySQL, allow you to select today's date without a from clause. You can just select the system date, different to Oracle, which uses sysdate. I can't remember what they use. But you can select sysdate in Oracle. Oh, that's different to that one, isn't it? Let's make it the same. SYSDATE, comma space, comma space. Oh, that's brilliant. I appear to have insert. not on. I didn't do that, did I? I said insert there. What on earth's going on here? This sort of thing always happens to me on classes. I must have pressed insert by mistake. There we go, that's better. And in fact, on here I will do it like that. There we go. Now it looks like this query. So we're selecting sysdate, which is the current date. We're also taking the date out of that, calling it today, and we're taking the time out using tchar and calling it the time. If we run that query, we get that's sysdate, that's today, that's the time. Now the problem with that is you get 11 rows, and that's because sale order's got 11 rows in it. So whatever you put there, whatever table you put there, it will print the number of rows in that table. So if you had a table with one row, you could use that, but you haven't perhaps, or if you haven't, and if you haven't, Oracle supply a table called dual, D-U-A-L, there, and that's a dummy table. It's got one row, and if you run the query for the dummy table, you just get one row. Same thing, today formatted and the time formatted, and it can be used like this for things like the user. If you use 77, today's date, which is sysdate, sys timestamp, which gives you today's date and the time to fractions of a second. Useful, I suppose, if you're using a website to sell things and you want to know exactly when something's sold, or eBay for instance, you know, fractions of a second when people are bidding, you would use a timestamp field rather than a date field. And it's also, you can look at the session time zone, which is Europe, London. We're not GMT at the moment, we're BST because we put our clocks, I can never remember, forward an hour I think in the summer, and then back an hour when it comes to October. Right. Now, like I said, that's when we stopped last time we did this. If you come on session 2 on Thursday, we'll next be looking at the order by clues, top end queries, concatenation, which should have been further back, the bit with the double pipes, the in operator, between, like, and then to give it a break from SQL, I'm going to do the theory of relational databases and entity diagrams. I didn't want to do that first because I thought if people came on the first course they want to do some queries, write some SQL. So I put that in as a second section. And then we go through the whole course here. At the end you'll find the data. Here's the, oh, this that's loading, that's exporting, importing data. Like a blank page there. What's that doing now? It's interesting. Do away with that. Don't need blank pages in the notes. Right, there's the data, it's in the tables, and there are the entity relationship diagrams which show you the layout of the tables, and in the next section I'm going to show you how to draw these things in SQL Developer. Back at the beginning, if you do come on the course, the contents, if you get bored you can stop the video now because it's the end of the course. The contents, there we are, that's what we're going to cover. And if you do want to come on the course and you look in the notes that you've got, what we'll do now, we'll save that because that will be the notes for class 2, where you get the whole of class 1 plus the notes for the rest of the course. But I don't give them away because that's how I make a living. Back here in the zip file, in SQL, in notes, the PDF file which you're looking at, when you get to the end of sessions 2 to 6, you'll find this page on page 31. So what we've just done, we just got as far as the dual table, and then there's all these bits which we didn't have time to cover. If you go past that and you get to the feedback, you can give me some feedback via email. If you want to come on the next course, you can join the session using PayPal to web@kenmar.fastmail.net, and I'll be giving out my email address for people who want to join, or they can private message me. If you click there in the notes, it doesn't work in my PDF viewer. I can right click and copy the link address. Oh, that's worked. That doesn't always work either. If I paste it in there, now if you click there, you can send me £4 for the next class. And that's the contents of what we're going to cover. And that's the end of the course. Thank you very much. If you're interested in any other videos, I have a YouTube channel which I often post links to in the WhatsApp group, and pass this around amongst your colleagues. I'll tell you what, if you go back in the WhatsApp group after you watch this, you can post a comment on what you thought of it. You know, the more people who come on the course, the merrier. Obviously I owe more money, but it's still peanuts. But it's more fun teaching lots of people. There are 100 people or more in the group, and I'm getting responses from half a dozen. I don't know why the other people are there. You know, it's a training group. If they want training, if they don't want training, they shouldn't be in the group, really. Anyway, I'm done now. I'm not going to rant, and hopefully I'll see you in the next class. Thank you and goodbye.